I wanted to speak about something very profound that I realized today. And I would like to begin with, my dear world, I have bowed to your greatness before I was born. I've titled this episode, I Discovered the Secret of Secrets. And so this episode is the vision I have, the view I have to share now. It is very significant for me because in the 31 laps around the sun that I have ran so far, there was something that I felt was missing. And of course, people may think there's many things missing from the lives that we live. But I found out today that what I discovered, it was so profound, it was so changing, so life-changing, that I felt I have to share it. I want to take the viewers to how my mindset was, I would say, in the past month. And so there was something that happened internally in my inner realms. I was walking in this place in Dubai called Emirates Mall of the Emirates. And so on that day, I don't know what happened, but for a moment, as someone who, you could say, for a decade has felt that his soul was commanded, but also prepared to speak about the advanced potential of all the beings here. But when I was in the food court, believe it or not, of the Mall of the Emirates, that place, this idea, this vision, this view approached me, and at the time, I didn't know what it was. I shouldn't say I didn't know what it was, but there was something about it that I realized today that changed all of that. And so when I was in the food court of that mall, for a moment my mind shifted the context of reality, and I saw a new context to this world. And it wasn't a very, at the time, you know, I don't know, maybe I wasn't having the best day, but pretty much I had this insight that this planet is a farm. And there was something, you know, later on I realized that there was something heartbreaking about it, but there was something profound that came with it. That for the first time I began seeing human beings in some sense similar to, believe it or not, like farm animals. But instead, rather than being domesticated by something else, I saw them being self-domesticated through the use of language, conditioning, and for a moment it was as if I had this view that every person in this world is like an animal waiting to be fed. You know, the idea is not as beautiful, but it was the idea that came to me. And I think after that insight, you know, that very heavy insight, that I was like, wait a minute, I have been in my inner realms envisioning an incredibly advanced species here. But suddenly it had become for me that it was as if creatures, it was like animals. It was, do you know, And after that day, something happened where I actually, I'm known something I held as part of my pride for a while, was that when I was young, many people would tell me, "Why are you smiling?" And I had no idea I was smiling. But after this insight of suddenly the reversion of this advanced potential to humanity that I saw, suddenly it had come to as if I am also this creature in a farm. Do you know? And for a moment, all my senses, there was an advantage and disadvantage to this perspective, okay? And I'll explain that. The advantage was that the moment I began seeing people similar to farm animals, my interest in them went away. That means my inner realm stopped creating people, creating their value, trying to figure out their value. And it was as if there was this strange sort of freedom that came with that view. And later on, I'll explain this freedom, what that freedom was from the proper context. But at the time, after that food court incident, I found myself becoming, the advantage was that there was suddenly no fear. There was suddenly no idolization of individuals. There was suddenly no, I love that person, I hate that person. It had all suddenly changed, as if I had gone into a farm and there was like a cow mooing or like a sheep baying or something, you know? And for a moment, the significance, it was as if people had reverted into just creatures. And there was nothing more to it, but there was a disadvantage. The disadvantage was the days began becoming stiffer, harder, more strict. I stopped seeing beauty. And it was as if my mind went into this sort of framework where, because I had the immense value I saw in human beings suddenly had gone away. It was as if nothing was that important. Nobody was that important, and I was living, it was as if, strangely, it was a sort of smooth sailing. But the disadvantage of it was that I felt my heart was sealing up. I wouldn't say that I'm a perfect example of a religious person, okay? But there are moments in my life where I have felt impure, or I have felt something missing, like some weight, where I don't know how to say it. And in those moments, my prayer was that I would say, "God, unseal my heart. God, unseal my heart. God, unseal my heart." Like a lost soul reaching for what is it? They call it lifeboat or something. But that intensity, that weight, the days were going by, and what was even more bizarre? The moment I started seeing people like farm animals, you might not believe it, I'm someone very sensitive to my own karma and how it happens, and I suddenly noticed people were suddenly behaving way better. People were nicer, but something within my own self felt like something was being missed. Something was locked down. But today, out of that intensity and non-smiling and non-happy, kind of this, I don't want to say apathetic, but just this view that, like, man, I'm in a farm. And we're all animals in this farm. And the animals, in some sense, the moment the farmer comes in with food, they're all like, "Yo, feed me, feed me, feed me." They all go berserk, having no sense of responsibility of where they are, because they all think they're trapped, because they are bound. But today I heard a sentence, and I would say it was honestly, I've given many talks on this, you know, starting 2023, but it was this year that the idea of truth, the ultimate truth, the idea of God became significant in a different way. And I would say in this past month, if I felt like I was climbing a mountain with a heavy backpack, today that backpack came off. And it was through something I heard. And this is what I term the secret of secrets. When I say I discovered the secret of secrets. There is a saying in the Islamic tradition, and it's a hadith. Hadith means it is that which was spoken by the Prophet of Islam. And the sentence is, humble yourself to God, and God will raise your rank. You see, the impression before was that it is just the self, it is just this idea of ourself that we have, that we think that is the main focal point, is the main thing that in some sense should do things. And when it comes to the outer realms, when it comes to, you know, to some degree, let's say elevating in rank in the outer realms, sure, you know, it's like brute force, you know, the alpha gorilla, you know, scares off the other gorillas, you know, same with like wolves, probably with lions and other species. But what I realized when it comes to our inner life, you know, if you want to increase in rank as a physical being, you take the warrior's approach. If you want to, in some sense, let's say, raise in rank in the domains of mind, when I say inner realms, it's deeper than the mind. Because there is that unknown viewer, that unknown witness watching the known life. The life that comes to be known. And so, when it comes to raising the rank of yourself as a being, this was what I find that this whole it took me 31 years to discover. And it's the biggest thing I've realized. And that is, if you want to raise your rank as a being, the secret is humility. And humility means that you realize you are not the boss of this world. To cast away the ego, which has to take. And the ego, they say the mind is a lousy master and a great servant. And the mind is a lousy master. Why? Because if the ego cannot take, it still maintains an ego through giving. But what I realized is that that impression, that inner realm view that the world is like this and therefore I am like that, it went away, and I realized that to in some sense raise in the rank of your own soul, to raise in the ranks of souls, it is a humility. And humility means if in this lifetime you have been obsessed with yourself, obsessed with what will happen to yourself, or how you will end as a self, or how you began as a self, a constant self-obsession. The path that opened to me was one where it was very similar to how attention doesn't need to do anything. Or let me say it in this way, the intenseness of a specific self to administer the moment, if there is a trust. Or I will say, when everything becomes trust, and you find yourself being in the presence of truth, you realize you are not the administrator. And the moment I realize this, I cannot tell you what sort of feeling of relief there is. I have become so simple, and it is so simple, that once, and I say, even though the hadith says, make yourself humble to God, and God will raise your rank. It's another way of saying, when it comes to matters of the deepest essence and essence of our being, it is not raised by what we are being. It is not raised by the body, it is not raised by the mind. It is raised when we realize that we are not the administrator of consciousness. It means it is okay to be simple. It is okay to realize not the authority of the self that is unseen. And when everything turns into trust, that is the final station. It means that which was resisting the nature, the true nature of being. See, there in enlightenment talk, there's this idea of self-realization. It's the notion that there was a truth here before you were born and you are realizing it. And that's the idea of the true nature. The true nature is not per se just an individualistic perception or perspective. That when you don't know, be humble in the presence of that which knows. And today I felt my heart unseal. I don't know how. But all that it has been is that sight, that the way I would look at this world has changed. Something of the context has shifted for me. That the importance I had given to the idea that had come into my mind in a moment, as if I had made an idea the contextual God. You know, I was worshiping the context of reality. You see, the great prophets came and said, don't worship concepts as God. And now, I have reached this point where the idea is there is no context to worship either. To be free, or to free the self from the world, you must free the world from the self. This does not mean destroying the self. This doesn't mean getting rid of an ego, which is the idea of a sense of self that in accordance to your new perceptions constantly changes. It's a sort of a noticing through an appreciation of the space where it's all happening. You know, today I cried, but it was tears, not tears of I would say tears of a sort of weakness, or tears of misfortune. You know, it was something more than the expectation of, you know, a million follower channel with like ridiculous income and all of this. It was just this thing that I realized, what a gift. What a gift that out of all the things in this world that we think, many people think that their problems come from outside. It was as if one thing that the self could not free itself because it couldn't see was itself. And this world, if I was to give you my honest impression of it, this world it works under it works under an intelligence of a field of activity that knows, as if there isn't a genius that created of all this, but there is a genius moment. There is an original moment, an original genius that moves reality. For me, it has changed. It has changed from being an individual entity in an unknown world, moving to more. It's all being administered through a field of activity, and once the sense of self does not burden itself with an ownership of reality, then reality opens up. The humility of a self in the presence of the world is to acknowledge that the world is present before it. And you know what's bizarre? Everybody as a child, they were so close to this as kids. Why? Because humility was okay. It was okay to be administered by that which was beyond our own power. Whoever you are hearing this, the secret of secrets is very simple. It is a moment of realizing, not a moment of realizing you don't have control. But realizing to become humble in the presence of truth means to stop telling truth what to do. And then you can experience the presence of it. And this is honestly one of the most beautiful sentences I have heard in this lifetime. This does not mean change everything you know and become someone else. It means that internal effort for the specification of the result of a specific self. If you want to raise your rank beyond the body and mind, obviously it is a sort of work beyond the body and mind. And if everything we do is of body and mind, release the firm hold you have on the expectation, that is the expectation of reality. Because true peace does not come from a domination of enemies. You see, the enemies are endless, you know. The turmoils of a changing world, the turbulence of a changing world is endless. And so, the secret of secrets, who know? I mean, many know. Maybe I'm new to the party, but it's honestly humility. And humility means that inner effort to have a specific outcome. You release it, and then everything becomes the symphony of movement out of nowhere. Thank you for listening. And I'll say it again. Especially since I've had to think about my name. My name is Amin. May make yourself humble to God, and God will raise your rank, which is another way of saying, if you did not create this world, then you're not the authority of this world. And if you're not the authority of this world, then with what authority can you raise your own rank? You see, there is something here before the human idea owned it, before the human idea sculpted it, which is another way of saying there is a truth before the human. And the humility of the human is the required transparency to notice it. And it is so beautiful when your heart becomes unsealed, because then nothing, it's as if there's nothing beyond the authority that is beyond you that can touch you, that can interfere. Open your heart, or through humility, allow your heart to be opened. There is a incredible, there's a beauty to this world that is waiting to be acknowledged. You know, it's equivalent, like, you know, in Christianity they say God is like the Father, you know, but I would say it's more like the trust that comes with being in the presence of truth, because the humility evaporates the untruth. Thank you for listening.